Good evening, everyone. My name is Bill Torrens. I'm Superintendent of Student Achievement for the Program Division here at the HWDSB. Extending on behalf of the Chair of our Board, Don Danko, and our Director of Education, Cheryl Robinson-Petrosini, your warmest welcomes and thank you for joining us tonight for this session. With me is Lisa Reynolds, who is our Special Assignment Teacher for French as a Second Language. Lisa will be joining us in just a few minutes. So I am at this point quickly ensuring that our sound is working. If you can hear me, I ask in the Q&A if one or two people could please simply respond that I can hear you. And we're hearing yes, that sound is working, which is excellent. So again, welcome for coming out this evening for our French Immersion Information Night. We are really excited to be able to provide this session tonight. We start our evenings and our meetings with the land acknowledgement. So I'd like to start by acknowledging the land. The Hamilton Wentworth District School Board acknowledges our presence on ancestral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee Confederacy lands as determined by the Dish with the One Spoon Treaty. The intent of this agreement is for all nations sharing this territory to do so responsibly, respectfully, and sustainably in perpetuity. We respect the long-standing relationships with local Indigenous communities, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and the Six Nations of the Grand River. We also, when we provide the land acknowledgement, provide a reflection. And for me as a superintendent within the board, it's important for me to always reflect on my learning and my continued learning and understanding the importance of not only the land acknowledgement, but continuing my understanding around issues surrounding Indigenous education. And for me, especially, I've been focusing my learning on truly understanding what treaty relationships and the sovereign nature of our First Nations. Moving forward, in terms of our agenda tonight, we will approximately spend a half hour providing an overall presentation. So a vision of our French as a Second Language program here at the HWDSB through Lisa Reynolds. She'll also continue to share more about the French Immersion program, specifically how to support students in French Immersion. I'll then return and talk about the Grade 1 French Immersion application process. Actually provide some frequently asked questions in advance, but throughout we encourage you to put questions in our question and answer, and I'll continue to be on the screen. And for the approximately until 8 o'clock, I will take questions from the chat or the question and answer, and I'll do my best to answer, if not all, common themed questions throughout. I'll also note that if there are questions or very individualized concerns around a family situation, we also have an email address that you can use to send those in a more private and confidential matter, and that is fi@hwdsb.on.ca. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Lisa to start to present the vision of French immersion in the province, but also here at the HWDSB.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. To begin, we'll talk about the vision for the Ontario FSL curriculum. And the vision is that students will communicate and interact with growing confidence in French, one of Canada's official languages, while developing the knowledge, skills, and perspectives they need to participate fully as citizens in Canada and in the world. Both core French and French immersion programs lead to language proficiency. You can see in the slide that both pathways have opportunity to challenge the DELF exam. The DELF is a diploma issued by the French Ministry of National Education in recognition of French language studies. All grade 12 core and immersion students have the opportunity to challenge the DELF, and the benefits of the DELF include having a certified language assessment recognized internationally, and it is also a lifelong certification and something that students use as well for post-secondary applications. At HWDSB, we have two programs that lead to French proficiency. We have Core French and French Immersion. The goal of Core French is to provide students with fundamental communication skills in French and an understanding of the nature of the language and its culture. And as you can see in the slide, it is one subject. It begins in grade 4, and usually by the end of grade 8, students accumulate 600 hours of instruction, and then once they move to secondary, 1 credit is required in French. The goal of the French Immersion program is to develop students' proficiency in French while building a mastery in English. The French Immersion program does not replace first language, and students develop proficiency, communication skills in both languages. And as you can see in the slide, French is the language of instruction. The provincial standard is a minimum of 50% instruction in French, which by the end of grade 8 leads to roughly 3,800 hours, and HWDSB offers more than the minimum. So today at HWDSB, we have 17 elementary schools that offer French immersion, as you can see on the slide, and we also have 2 secondary schools, Sherwood and Westdale. There is a long-standing history as well of French immersion at HWDSB, and our first 2 French immersion classes began in 1975 at Earl Kitchener. At HWDSB, grade 1 students spend approximately 70 to 85% of their day in French to develop the French proficiency, and this is consistent amongst all schools. A typical day in a French immersion program looks very similar to a day in an English class, except that most subjects are delivered in French. In grade 1, there are many opportunities to play with words through songs, poems, and plays. And as you can see on the slide, French, math, science are consistently delivered in French from grades 1 through 8. So as you can see here, at the end of French immersion, students have an opportunity for a certification of French immersion. They have a successful completion of 10 secondary credits. 4 are in the subject of French and 6 are of their choice. So by the end of the 4-year program in secondary school, students will be able to follow their pathway, whether it be apprenticeship, college, community living, university, and work, with the benefit of French as a second language. So as we look at building English and French proficiency, the goal is to develop students' proficiency in French while building the mastery of English. And it does not replace their first language. Students will develop proficiency communication in both languages. So we sympathize that this is a hard decision, and it is important to first understand the French immersion program and how it was developed. Educators understand that parents and caregivers play an important role in a child's success in school. Children in the French immersion program benefit from learning, discussion, and activities that occur at home, and these opportunities definitely support the continued development of literary skills at home. The French immersion program is intended for families that do not speak French, and all communication between the teacher, parent, and caregivers is in English. So as you can see, the roles in the school community are very important to support this. We have educators, the schools have learning resource teachers, we have ESL specialists, speech and language, principals, the community partners, and for French are definitely an excellent resource to support.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm now going to turn to the online application process. And just a little bit of background in terms of the process. We do do a system-wide application process based on a motion and approval by our Board of Trustees 6 years ago. Their commitment to the community was that all families who wanted their child in French immersion would be able to do so beginning in grade 1. However, to enable us to meet that commitment and to manage accommodation pressures on some of our buildings and to ensure we have stable and predictable staffing in place beginning in grade 1, we have developed this application process. There was also an intention around the process that we would seek to balance in our dual track, French immersion and English schools, seek a balance, approximately 40% to 60% of French to English or English to French within those schools through this process as well. The online application is at our board website. The link is on the screen. And although the graphic may be slightly small, it essentially hasn't changed right now. So moving through that link, you'll see French immersion registration, and the registration occurs completely online at that point. You'll be asked to sign in if you're a current HWDSB parent with the email and password that you would be using whenever you are using the parent portal or doing any other interactions with the HWDSB. If you are new to the HWDSB, perhaps your child is not yet registered with us, or you're in another school board, for instance, or perhaps in a private school currently, then you simply create an account to access that. The applications are actually connected to our student information system to try and make this as streamlined a process as possible. You'll eventually come to an enrollment page, as you can see on the screen right now, where you'll be asked to fill in some information. It is secure and private in terms of living within our student information system that we use for all of our over 45,000 students. In terms of timelines, we are opening at 9 a.m. on Monday morning, November 28th. We are opening up our process. So I'll underline, this is for grade 1 entry next September 2023. So it is for senior kindergarten students only and students who will be turning the age of 6 in 2023. We will keep the portal open then until the 16th of January. So approximately 6 weeks through the winter holidays. And then we do close down our site at that point. We then spend the intervening 6 weeks in assessing the number of applications, determining where classrooms will be maintained, opened, or closed throughout the system. And then we communicate via email directly to you on Friday, February 24th. Typically that goes out at the beginning of the morning. So it is key to have a proper and correct email address that we can locate you at to make sure you do have that information. We provide families then 2 weeks approximately to decide to accept registration and accept place in French immersion or not. Then after some time around administration, we actually reopen the application for the application portal for late applicants beginning in April, and we do keep it open until the end of August. So while we have a formal window through November, from the end of November to mid-January. If for whatever reason you do not make an application at that point, there is an opportunity beginning on April 3rd to do so. As I mentioned, the Board of Trustees really provided us with guidance around how we can decide where students are placed in the program. The commitment is every student will be offered a placement in a French immersion program. However, we cannot guarantee that it would be in your home school. So we do look at each school's French immersion boundary, and that is the first criteria. We do bring all the students within a French immersion boundary. So for example, Coots Paradise is a school that has a large boundary for French immersion. We would group all of those applications together. They are not time-stamped in any way. It is not a first come or first served process. We assess then the number of spaces we have available within the school with the number of applications. If we have siblings entering a French immersion program, we do have them attend the same school as their older sibling, if their older sibling is in French immersion in that school, and if we have space to do so. So if I use an example of a school that has 25 spaces and has perhaps 27 applications, we would seek to enable siblings to stay with their sibling in that school, as long as both siblings are in French immersion, both children are in French immersion. We'll also look again in terms of that decision making, French and English enrollment in our dual track schools. And we have to be quite mindful as well as how many classrooms we have in each school. By opening a large number of grade 1 classrooms, we're actually adding classrooms to a school all the way through to grade 8 in many schools. So we do take a look at those accommodation pressures as well. With a key portion or a key understanding around our French immersion program and the application process is also around transportation. So to be really clear, we do offer French immersion transportation for students who are in their catchment school, following our transportation policy. If the distance walk to school is more than 1.6 kilometers. From grades 1 to 6, we have a black and yellow school bus with community stops. And so as outlined on the screen, the community stop is a centrally located stop in a safe location that will pick up a large group of students at one place. They may change, so where they are now may change year to year based on schools' enrollment and where students live. But we use this model, especially in our more rural areas, to ensure that students in catchment have access to transportation, but we're not able to create a door-to-door service, so to speak. In grades 7 and 8, unless there's an existing black and yellow bus route that accommodates, we then shift students to bus tickets via the Hamilton Street Railway, HSR. I will note that students who are out of catchment, including accepting an out of catchment placement in French immersion, they are not eligible for transportation as per our transportation policy. So I'm swinging back a little bit because I think it's very important to note how transportation is decided. If the number of our applicants exceeds the number of places when when we have that occur, as I mentioned, students with older siblings will be offered a place. The remaining places then go into a random selection process. And then we will select students who are offered a placement in their home French immersion school, and some will receive an out-of-catchment placement and offer, hence the information I shared around transportation. And if you are offered an out-of-catchment placement, you would need to organize your own transportation, but we place your child on a wait list for their home French immersion school until space opens. I will share, although not a guarantee of the future, any family that has applied on time, meaning within our application window over the past 5 years, has, if not in February, by September of the school year, has accepted or has been offered a placement in their home French immersion school. We do suggest to families that if they are interested in French immersion and are on a wait list, they can return to French in their home school, return to English rather in their home school, and wait for us to contact them, or they can accept an out-of-placement, accept an out-of-catchment placement, and again, wait for us to contact you. We monitor and make updates throughout the school year, beginning in April. For making offers. So please, if you're in a situation where you are on a wait list, know that there is a process that may move slowly at times, but provides an opportunity to ensure that you're at your home French immersion school, hopefully by the end of September at the very latest. Historically, what we have found is that some families will decline their offer in that March period. They've decided to not do French immersion. We see other families make that decision at the end of kindergarten or through the summer. So there can be quite a bit of movement in terms of wait lists through the year. And if you apply late, and I apologize for the aged date, but we do close the wait list at the end of September. If you do apply late, you'll be offered, if there's space, or added to a wait list. Typically, transportation cannot be provided for late applications. So in terms of what to do next, as a family, I do, strongly recommend to all families to consider what you feel is right for your child. I think it's important to reflect on the information shared by Ms. Reynolds earlier in terms of there's 2 pathways and 2 programs of the HWDSB for French, and families make decisions based on their circumstance for which is the best and most appropriate for them. Both of those destinations currently can lead to the DELF qualification, or challenging for the DELF, that internationally recognized French certification, at different levels, admittedly, but again, a very valuable credential for a student heading to post-secondary education. So there is a bit of time now to reflect on that as we open very soon. But if you do feel that French immersion is for you, or you feel strongly you're leaning that way, I'm going to strongly encourage you to please then apply by January 16th. That means that you've applied on time, and you can always step away, or you can always decline that at any time after that point. So the frequently asked questions is opened now, and I think we've been answering some questions online, which is wonderful. And we have some frequently asked questions that I'm going to share, which also provides you some time to, as you've been listening, to use the question and answer box a little more. We do get many parents asking us how I can help prepare my child for French immersion. And we actually don't have a recommendation of anything specific to prepare your child for French immersion. What we do recommend is to continue to engage your child in learning and continue to support their early reading and their early math skills. And if your language at home, your first language is English, if your first language at home is not English, regardless, continue to develop first language literacy for your child. Reading in your family's language at home, continuing to use it at home. Research strongly indicates that young children transfer their language learning from their first language to their second or third or fourth language, especially reading skills. So continue to read. There's no need to do any specific work around French. The assumption that we start grade 1 French immersion with is that your child knows no French at all. So there's no preparation needed. The class is all, in a sense, starting at the same place, but we do strongly encourage to continue early literacy, as I said, especially early reading and early math. How will I know if the French immersion program is the right fit for my child? Again, you know your child best. In terms of, are they engaged? Are they excited at the prospect of learning in another language? Absolutely, French immersion is for all students. So if you're concerned about your child's learning in any way, shape, or form, or some of their learning needs, perhaps, we will provide the same supports through French immersion as we would in the English program. So please, it's really around a family choice. It is a program that is open and available for all students. Parents and guardians' responsibilities. A question we often get, especially with the acknowledgement as our children get older within the French immersion program, if we don't have a strong foundation in French, some of the more science and mathematics learning specifically can be difficult to perhaps support your child's learning in if you don't have French. So your responsibilities really are as with any other parent, and that is to engage and support your child in their learning, to be interested and having your children talk about what they've learned for the day. Continue to support them with home reading and engaging. You'll also find that your child's classroom teacher will have some suggestions, reading that would come home reading programs, for example. All of these can very much support and very much enrich your child's learning. The development of English, again, will continue through core English, and one of the things that English-speaking parents can do in terms of the program, or all parents can do, but is to absolutely continue to have reading in language other than French within the house. And will my child's English language skills suffer in a French immersion program? No, not necessarily. Now, we do have core English begins in grade 1, so English language learning will continue. But as I mentioned, as the program continues, your children will continue to be supported. If there are additional supports in reading French or English required, then working through the teacher, those will be provided. And yes, there are supports for students who have difficulties in French or English. So we, as I said before, French is absolutely, our French immersion is absolutely open to all students. And are children able to enter the French immersion program after grade 1? So we're a grade 1 entry school board. That's our formal entry for students who do not have English. The only children who are able to enter the French immersion program after grade 1 are students who have the equivalent, a grade equivalent ability in French. So if you are moving from the Halton District School Board and your children are in grade 2 and grade 4 and they've been in French immersion, then certainly they will can continue in French immersion. If you're coming from another jurisdiction or there is a question around the French skills of your child, then we actually do an assessment, and we'll work with you in terms of is it an appropriate fit in terms of your child's success. And we work with families throughout the school year around that question as they move into the HWDSB. However, it is very difficult. Our experience is that the amount of language learned by our students, even by the winter break of grade 1, oral language in French developed, is tremendous. And the program begins to be very difficult to access for someone who doesn't have French quite quickly. And that is the end of the slideshow itself. And I am going to stop sharing. And again, provide a couple minutes for families to ask some questions. And I will return in just a few moments and begin to answer some common questions. Thank you for your patience, and I've had an opportunity now to take a look at our question and answer. We have a question around if we decide not to approve French immersion for grade 1, do you stay at your home school instead? And you absolutely do. So you'll stay at your home English school. Many of our schools have, so I'll use an example, Earl Kitchener, for instance, has Earl Kitchener and Central Public School within its French immersion boundary. So the English boundaries for Central and Earl Kitchener are in Earl Kitchener's French immersion boundary. I live in the central, if I lived in the central boundary and I decided to decline my placement in French immersion, then my child will go to Central or continue to be at Central for grade 1. I see a next question is French immersion appropriate, recommended if one of the parents of the child is fluent in French? And absolutely, those are family decisions. But I would say that that may be advantage over the years in terms of being able to support academically in ways that other parents can't. It's it is an advantage, so to speak, but I wouldn't also use not having French. I wouldn't deter anyone from having their child in French immersion. There are a number of supports in place that we actually provide and use, and some through even TFO, TV Ontario in French, that can provide tutoring support, for instance, in mathematics in grades 7 through 9 in French. I see a question around core French. Is it a required registration? And if yeah, do I sit at grade 4? So actually, once students move into grade 4 from grade 3, then they start to have approximately 200 minutes of French a week. There's no, the program simply begins. There's no action that a parent has to take. And just kind of building on that is another question around, does the child have to be in French immersion to be part of the core French program? No, core French is the Ministry of Education mandated French program that all students are required to attend if they're not in French immersion, with some exceptions, of course. But core French, you would do your learning in English, kindergarten, year 1, year 2, grade 1, 2, and 3, and then core French just simply starts in grade 4 if you're in the English track. There's a question around, is there a benefit to enrolling as soon as possible as opposed to waiting until later in the year? Are spots first come, first serve? So spots are not first come, first serve. In terms of fairness, and we would say equitable access to the application, we leave the window open, the application window open. We do not do first come, first serve, but I would say critically, if you are interested, please do apply by the 16th of January. Make sure your application is in by that time, so you're considered an on-time applicant, rather than being a late applicant and applying in April. So it's to your benefit to do so. Because for the late applicants, after April, we've already placed all of the on-time applicants in classes in schools. So your opportunity to be in your home school is heightened, greatly increased if you are if you're applying on time. How often do kids get sent out of their catchment? It is more than they do in the local school, or you can't really bank on that. It is a tough question. We find that there are often a handful of students who throughout the spring are offered placements, or the late winter and in the spring offered out of catchment placements. But generally, if you have applied on time, our experience, although not guaranteed, our experience is that you will receive a call or an email inviting you to go to your home French immersion school. So local schools, the vast majority of students will, unless something significant changes this year than the previous 5 years, the vast majority of students, 90, 97, 98% of students will receive a placement in their home school. Is there anything on the application to state the sibling will be entering JK in 2013, so it would be possible to keep them together as well? Yeah, thank you for that question. It's a really good question. Our French immersion schools are closed out of catchment. So I think one of, the quick answer is no, there isn't anywhere on the application to state that a sibling would be coming. But the second piece to that, and the reason why I start speaking about closed out of catchment, is that it's keeping families together is something that certainly we strive for. But we know that there are many families who the eldest child will move to a different school for French immersion, and the younger siblings will be in junior and senior kindergarten. And through our catchment policy, we're not able to bring those younger students over to the French immersion school at that time. I see a question. And the next question is, if you accept an out of catchment placement, does this mean your child would stay at the school every year after starting it? Or is there a chance to reapply to homeschool? So we do work to repatriate if someone has accepted the out of catchment and wants to, we have space in grade 2 or grade 3. So schools start to manage that aspect of the process over time. But certainly we know that there are students who will leave the French immersion program at the end of grade 1, which often can open a space if you're in an out of catchment situation. Again, I cannot provide you a firm guarantee of that will happen, but that has been our experience. And there's nothing to prevent you from contacting the principal of the homeschool and seeing if there is space for the following year. Yeah, we would encourage you to do so if that's what you're interested in. The next question is, if my child is struggling in French immersion and we choose to switch them back to core English, do they have to wait out the school year? No. So French immersion is an optional program. And certainly if you decide to make a change, we support you making that change as a family. The school will probably work to have a conversation to see if there's other supports or that we can put in place rather than making that decision quickly. There could be some additional support that could really quite help your child. What we do, however, if your French immersion school is not your English catchment school, we do offer the opportunity to finish the school year in an English classroom in your French immersion school, and then you would restart if you wish. You would start in your English program in the following September, although you're more than free to return directly to your English school at that time as well. Are there plans to expand the number of secondary schools offering immersion? No, there's not. It's a common question, and it's quite a good question because we know that geographically, the two programs were a very large board. The challenge with offering additional secondary programs is really about two things: student enrollment and staffing. So the larger number of students who are attending a program, the greater the program, the different kinds of courses, types of courses we can offer in secondary schools. Throughout the province, we do have an ongoing shortage of qualified French teachers, especially with secondary qualifications in maths and sciences. So by having two, we call them magnet schools or two primary locations for French immersion, we're in secondary, we're really able to focus our staffing, our recruitment of staff, and for the richest possible program we can provide throughout the school, throughout the student's experience. It's critical for us. We do provide transportation to secondary programs for all of our students who are outside of the walking distance. And we encourage students to continue in French immersion. We know that some students prefer to stay in their home community, but we're not planning to because we don't feel we're able to do so right now. And what are the approximate class sizes, number of students in the class? Another really good question. So there are no specialized class sizes for French immersion. So French Immersion Grade 1 class, our Grade 1 current ministry caps are 20 students in a class. However, a small number of classes across the board can be as large as 23 in Grade 1. French Immersion classes may also be combined classes, a Grade 1-2 class. So there's, like English classes, they're the same size as English track classes, and they can be combined classes like English track classes. So we don't differentiate at all in that way. If your child's not in the school system and doesn't have an OEN, we'll still be able to process that application. Absolutely. What we're not able to do, because we don't have your student information, is to draw on some larger student, connect that to our larger student information system. That's all. So you're not at any disadvantage if you're not currently in our board or in the school system in any way. The next question is, are there any recommendations for children from bilingual, non-French households? Is adding a third language shown to cause confusion? I would say for someone to be trilingual would make them a very fortunate person. And as I mentioned before, we know that continuing in your first language, English for many, but possibly not, at the HWDSB, for 1 in 5 of our students, English isn't their home language. We encourage continuing to use your first language orally, and continuing to learn how to read your first language, adding a third language, ultimately only really can benefit your child broadly. So again, I wouldn't dissuade you from going into French immersion because your family's already using 2 languages. How is the FI program incorporating the right to read, science of reading, research, and their daily practice? So another fabulous question. So the right to read and the science of reading, the right to read, for those of you who aren't perhaps overly aware, was a report from the Ontario Human Rights Commission on supporting students with learning disabilities in the acquisition of reading skills, and really lays out some very a large number of recommendations for school boards to adopt, and speaks to the importance of phonics and learning how to decode words as part of a student's learning. Second language acquisition can be a little different, where a lot of the work will focus on oral language and oral language vocabulary acquisition early in the program. But eventually you'll see that the work around phonics, the work around word study, the work around using decodable texts to become fluent readers of French will begin in grade 1 and 2 classrooms. And again, if we're identifying that a student's having some learning difficulties, then we start to look at extra supports. As a school board, we've been committed to improving early reading for 6 years now. We've had an early reading strategy, and that includes having 44 reading specialists in our kindergarten and grade 1 classrooms across the system, and that includes French immersion classrooms. So please be assured that French immersion classrooms will, and practice in French immersion classrooms will reflect the right to read, and you'll see high quality phonics instruction occurring. How do you ensure success in the program is accessible to all, even those whose parents don't speak French? Over time, we found that our French immersion students do find success. Not all of their parents have French as a second language or have a wide French experience. So it is a student by student, question around success. But what I would say is that having parents who do not speak French does not put a student at any sort of disadvantage. Having French might be a wonderful support and resource within your family, but our program and our teachers, it is predicated on families not having French, and that the French learning is really led at the school level, and then support that's needed from families. There's an explanation, especially in the early years, how families can support. But as students get older, then different sorts of supports and resources start to appear. And I mentioned, for example, online tutoring that's available in math through TFO, for instance, and our educators are have a strong background in terms of supporting students who need some extra support in French. So I wouldn't be concerned there. Our child requires after-school care. If we are placed in an out-of-catchment area, can we choose the location which offers after-school care? So this is one of those very specific situations. So what I would suggest, if you are in a situation where you've been offered an out-of-catchment location, and there may be possibly something that's more convenient to yourself, please send an email to us at the fi at hwdsb.on.ca. That's one of those really specific situations. I don't want to make any guarantees and build a false expectation, but certainly if there is a way that we can within our work that we can support a specific family situation, we'll certainly try to. Do they go to high school in a French immersion school too? Yes. So if your child continues all the way from grade 1 to grade 8, then you can decide to go to, depending if you're living into school that is in the secondary catchment for Westdale or Sherwood, your child can continue to French immersion there. Is there any differences in standardized testing between children in immersion and versus French only? I don't have direct information in front of me, and however, EQAO, some of the EQAO assessment for our students, and I don't have a breakdown around French and versus the English track with me, but I will note that our French immersion students in grades 3 and grade 6 can do some of the assessment in English as well. So it does become it can become quite difficult to kind of tease that out, so to speak. But what I would suggest is that we don't feel that either program advantages students in terms of EQAO in any way. Your child's progress and their support they would receive it in either program are really going to help them achieve to the highest level. How many subjects are in a French immersion program? Slightly earlier, we provided an overview. What I would suggest is that our French immersion schools try to provide as much of the learning in French as possible from kindergarten or from grade 1 through grade 8. At times, staffing situations or subject matter expertise means a program or a subject will be in English. So a great example I'd suggest is around instrumental music in grade 7 and 8. So, rarely are we able to provide that in French. That's typically more often in English. We'll see health and physical education often also occurs in English rather than in French for around staffing reasons. So it is a school by school situation. So, and then in secondary school, you need to earn a French immersion credit, grades 9 through 12, plus 6 additional credits to earn your certificate. And we're in our last 5 minutes, so I'm going to keep moving here with a few more questions we have. So can parents choose the school locations where their children will be studying? For example, the closest location to their home. So no, we actually don't provide an option in the application for choice. What we do, and back to our commitment, was everyone who wants their child in French immersion will receive an offer of a placement in French immersion. What we will do is, depending on where your home address is, we will seek to put you in your in catchment French immersion school. So all of our French immersion schools have catchment areas, and so we'll seek to put you in the catchment area. If there are more applications than spaces in that catchment area, and we have to use a process that includes a lottery, a random selection, then we will possibly have some folks who will be offered a place outside of catchment for their child. So in a follow-up, to be clear, a child can apply but not get in. So yeah, to be clear, a child can apply for French immersion and not get into their home school, but they will be in French immersion if you choose as their parent or guardian. I see another question. My child is not in the school system yet, and we're trying to decide to enroll in FI or just in catchment regular school. Should we apply for both for the fall of 2023? So a really great question. Again, there could be a number of families in this scenario. What I would suggest is you're free to register for your grade 1 English track at any time, including the week before school starts at the end of August. Because if you are in the English, if you're going to be in the English track and you live within our school district, we absolutely need to find you a place in your home school. But with French immersion, you really do please, you only need to apply now for French immersion. You do not need to go in anytime between now and mid-January or the end of February and apply for or register for grade 1 next year. That can wait, I would suggest, into May and June for sure. So what my strong recommendation is, have your family's decision around French immersion, and if it is to be in English, the English track, then call the school, make them aware you've made that decision. Otherwise, just continue with our process here with French immersion as it moves through between now and into March. And at 7:59, I see someone said thanks, and I will thank everyone because we will end on time. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate all the great questions, and we see and there's approximately 134 families or households with us, which is wonderful. Again, fi@hwdsb.on.ca is your email address to contact us if you have further questions. And with that, have a great night.